Now we know that getting out into natural sunlight exposure is so important for our overall health, but I've got 7 sunburn prevention tips that are really important so that you don't overdo it and experience a sunburn. Okay, tip number 1 is to make sure that you're seeing that early morning sunlight. This means as close to that sunrise as possible. That first hour of the day after the sun has risen, there is no UV present, so there's no possibility of getting a sunburn or even a tan at that time. And what you want to make sure is that you're not wearing sunglasses. Of course, you're exposing as much skin as possible to that natural morning sun, and you don't have sunscreen on. Now, this is going to be important because your skin later in the day is going to start to make something called urocanic acid from the amino acid histidine. Now, this becomes important because that's your own natural sunscreen that your skin starts to make. So that's important for later in the day when the UV is stronger, but your eyes and your skin start to get those signals properly from that natural sun first thing in the morning. Okay, tip number 2 to prevent that sunburn is to make sure that you're slowly over time building up your UV base. So that is your natural solar callus, and what you want to do is start small. So if you're first getting your skin exposed to that natural UV light during the middle of the day, you want to start with little increments of time. Maybe you can only sit out for about 15 minutes, exposing just small parts of your body to the sun. So if you're super sensitive to the sun rays, some people say that they're allergic to the sun, maybe it's just your feet for 10 minutes on the first day, and then you can incrementally go and expose more of your legs as time goes on for longer periods of time. But it's all about building up that base over time that makes the difference so that you can spend much more time in the middle of the day with that natural UV exposure. Okay, tip number 3 is to make sure that you're covering up. You're going to seek shade when you know that you've had enough. So when you start to get a little bit pink, you're having a histamine response in the skin now. You're also seeing that more blood flow is coming to the surface of your skin. That's the indication that, yep, you've had enough sun for that day. You're going to go and seek cover in the shade, or you're covering up your skin and or going inside. This is something that animals naturally do out in the wild, and it's something that we have to heed and pay attention to as well when our own body has had enough of that sunlight. Okay, tip number 4 to prevent that sunburn is to make sure that you're not wearing your sunglasses unless it's absolutely necessary. So certainly if you're out skiing, if you're out fishing on, reflective surfaces, you're out on a white sand beach, maybe you're trying to read a book the old-fashioned way, in terms of that white paper and it's glaring in your eyes, of course you're going to wear your sunglasses. However, we don't need sunglasses typically very first thing in the morning as that sun is rising. And remember, that's that important time that's giving that proper signaling from that light into our eyes, onto our skin, that the day has begun for our circadian biology as well, our circadian rhythms, but for our skin to make its own natural sunscreen for later in the day. Okay, tip number 5 is to actually use a natural sunscreen. Now, this is something that I have a recipe for, and this is only when you know that you're going to be in the sun for prolonged periods of time and you're not going to have the ability to cover up or go inside. So there is always, of course, a time and a place for using that natural sunscreen, and of course without any of the chemicals, which is in most of the conventional sunscreens that are out there. Okay, tip number 6 is to eat more tomatoes and watermelon. Now, these are great because they naturally contain something called lycopene. They're loaded with antioxidants, but that lycopene acts as a natural antioxidant and prevention, so it's a natural sunscreen against having UV damage on your skin from the suns. And yes, when do tomatoes and watermelons grow? Well, usually they grow depending on where you live, in the summertime when we're naturally getting more of that UV exposure. And tip number 7 to prevent those sunburns is to see the sunset. Now, this is interesting because those red rays, the infrared, the far infrared from the sun, are actually very healing to the skin. They help to build collagen. This is one of the reasons why red light therapy is so popular and so great at helping with the anti-aging process, helping to build our own collagen. But as the sun is setting now, again, with our circadian biology, it is telling the body that it's time for rest and repair, secreting your own melatonin for that good night's sleep. And of course, our skin, if we did have a little bit too much sun damage during the day, it's going to repair itself overnight when we have that good night's sleep. So that's why seeing that sunset is a great time of day to get in that natural sunlight again, and there's no UV at that time. Now, do you wear sunscreen? I'm really curious. I want to hear from you in the comments. And I did mention making your own natural sunscreen, so I want to share my recipe with you. That's in another video, how to make natural homemade sunscreen. I'll see you there.